Hello and welcome to Hashtag General, a show that's running late because one of the hosts may have been finishing breakfast when we were supposed to go live. I'm that host, Logan Studley, and joining me as always, the one who had already eaten, Chris Akamura. How are you doing, Chris?
Have not eaten, but
oh, you have not eaten.
Same thing applies.
Yeah, no, how's it going, man? We had to skip 2 weeks ago because you had your second shot, and then later that week I dealt with my second shot. So, how are you doing?
Yeah, I was out for 2 days, given that second shot, and now I'm good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been going good. Just a lot of work, busy at work. A lot of big stuff going on that I can't talk about, but I'm excited about it.
Big stuff you can't talk about is always exciting because that means like something is happening.
Yeah, I'm excited. But other than that, just kind of playing games, watching shows. I'm behind on Bad Batch, so I know we're gonna talk about that later. But
that's fine. I given the fact that we're 5 episodes in and we haven't had a chance to talk about it, I feel like we're going to be talking more in general terms rather than specifics about each episode anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was down for like a day and a half. Like I was telling you, I felt good enough the day after I had my shot to where I was like, oh, I can get some work done today. And of course, that day I was in meetings all morning. And by the end of my meeting gauntlet, I ended up having to send a message to my boss being like, I'm falling asleep in the meetings. I'm taking the rest of the day because I was just done. And then I woke up the next day and like still feeling miserable, kind of went back to sleep, and then woke up around like noon and was just like, holy crap, I feel great. So luckily I was not down for like...
I feel like I can beat 1,000 horses.
Yeah. So it was... Yeah. But it was still like... James looked like death warmed over. Like it hit him hard. But yeah, I think he was only down for like 1 day. But no, just lots of, you know, watching TV. Like there one show I watched that I don't know if you've watched yet was Invincible, which is on Amazon Prime.
Oh, of course. Very good.
Very good. I went into it going like, oh, it's a comedy, and then did not expect to feel like my heart got torn out.
Oh, you didn't know at all.
I did not know at all. Like, it has comedic moments, but
okay.
my God.
So
It's a
So
good
I read the
show.
comic. So I read the comics, so I knew fully what I was expecting to go into. Um, so yeah, that I wow, okay. I couldn't even imagine going into that show blind. Um,
Yeah, I just knew people were talking about how good it was, and I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. And
no, it that
like
end of
as it
that
kept
first
going, it
episode
kept
was like
hitting harder and harder, and I'm just like, this show is like funny, but also just like heart wrenching. Um,
yeah, it
like I would not call it a like walking away. I'm like, I'm not sure I'd call it a comedy so much as it has a very comic sensibility, but it is not like not something you put
is it
on for the
listed
funny
as a comedy?
ha-has. What?
No, is it listed as a comedy?
I don't know, but like for some reason, everything
Why
I
did
had
you assume it was
seen,
a comedy?
like, I'm wondering if it was just like some of the way the marketing was handled. Like, I did not do look too deep into it. Like, I just happened to see enough on social media to where it just struck me as
Well, is it the
more
memes that hit you?
maybe. But I went into it thinking not necessarily that it was straight comedy, but that it would be like more comedy than.
Yeah, no.
But that's not a criticism so much as that says like clearly enough people liked it that I was seeing enough people talk about it that I was willing to give it a
Yeah.
shot without really knowing much beyond the fact that it was a superhero animated show where with a cast that was like a lot of people were celebrating the fact that because its casting is not just a bunch of white dudes.
Yeah.
And so I had given it a shot and was just like, oh yeah, this is somewhat funny, but like has some dramatic undertones. And then the show just kept going, and I was like, this is a dramatic show that has some comedic undertones. Really
Yeah, it
good. Highly recommend. But my God,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean the thing is like the comic is worse. Um, but you got to remember that the creator is the same guy that did The Walking Dead, right? So like,
Hmm.
it has that same kind of feel to it. The the feeling of dread every episode you watch. Um,
Yeah. Almost like a sense of just futility.
yeah,
Like you,
of like
you
this is gonna go poorly, and like what we'll just keep watching.
just because you win doesn't mean you win. Um,
Right.
but no, really good show. Really glad I watched it. Um,
Well, they got renewed for a couple other seasons, and
yeah,
I will say that as you keep going, the comic at least gets worse and worse and worse in terms of like tugging at your heartstrings. Um, so brace yourself.
yeah. I also watched. I don't know if you watched this one. Netflix did apparently one of Mark Millar's ones. Jupiter, like it's like Jupiter's Legacy or something. I think.
Oh, I did not see that. I assumed you were gonna say Jupiter Ascending for some reason.
No, it's like, but it was interesting. The main reason I heard about that one is one of the actors is actually Matthew Lanter, who we all know as Anakin Skywalker from the Clone Wars. And I was like, oh, I'll watch him in live action. Let's see this. It's about superhero, whatever. And it was just like, oh, it was interesting enough that I wouldn't sit there and speak high praises of the show, but I was interested enough in some of its lore and how it was being presented to where I'm very tempted to go back and actually find the graphic novel or the series run. Uh,
So
but
this is something that I've noticed about a lot of Mark Millar's stuff, where he, I, everyone, I'm a huge fan of him in terms of his world building, but not a huge fan of like the individual stories themselves. I don't know how you feel about him, but I've
yeah,
noticed that's a trend that I've noticed with his work that kind of with me.
because the only other thing I can think of that I've seen is Kingsman. No, that's not true. He did Kick Ass,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, Kick-Ass, and then he also did what got him kind of his start was the um was doing Civil War for Marvel.
Yeah.
So the thing that you'll note about like all this stuff is like Kingsman, um, and well, namely Kingsman and Kick-Ass, like the world building that he does is really unique and really fun and like something that you just want to know more about. But like the individual stories themselves aren't necessarily strong.
Yeah. Like it, because
So,
and that's how I felt watching it. It was just like the idea being presented in that show where it's like the second generation of superheroes like struggling to live up to the expectation of the first generation, which is actually like struggling to succeed at their stated goals, like is a very interesting concept.
mhm.
And I found myself like interested in like that part of the world, but was like again like less interested in a lot of the characters within it. Which is why I was like, oh, I kind of want to go back to like where I just was like, if there had been like a second season right then and there, I probably would have kept watching. I don't know if I'll keep like watch season 2 when it comes out, but I'm probably going to go find like the comic run just to read it because I'm interested enough in the world that I would like to know more about it, but I'm not necessarily like chomping at the bit for more of it the way I was with Invincible, where I was just like, I want a second season and I want it now. Even though, yes, it does get dark and kind of, like it's kind of depressing at points, but like it was so well done and so well executed that I just kind of wanted to, you want to keep going, you want to know more about it. And Jupiter, I was more like, I honestly could probably read like a wiki, like if there's like a fan, what is it, like fandom Wikipedia or Wikia, whatever they are now, that might be enough to, you know, fulfill my desire to learn more. So, but I think that's like a problem with everyone who does world building. Sometimes I know I get too into the weeds whenever I try to world build anything. Where I like building out like the history and like the politics and like every like all these little intricacies, but sometimes when you do that you lose sight of the fact you're supposed to be telling a story about characters.
Yeah.
And if those characters aren't interesting, it doesn't matter how interesting the world is because people are going to relate to the characters. They're not going to relate to the history textbook that you wrote to create the world. Unless you're crazy and you read the Lord of the Rings appendices all the time, like me.
Spoilers, I did that.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally, totally. I've yeah, and like if you're interested in stuff like that, it's fascinating. But if you aren't interested in stuff like that, it could kill a story. You could have the world's best backstory. It doesn't matter if the story is not great. So yeah, I haven't thought about Millar's work in that way, but I think it's yeah. I remember watching like I didn't finish the second Kingsman just because it didn't feel like it lived up to the first one. Like I wasn't as into it when I was watching it, but yeah, like the idea behind it was just fascinating. But yeah, so I've done that. Also, finally got some people into been trying out Valheim, so that's actually been really
Hey,
fun. I named my character Steve because why not? And I built Shay Steve because of course. And yeah, I haven't defeated any of the bosses because I'm too busy building. It's like I want to defeat the bosses not because I'm like I must progress. It's more like I need better tools. Oh crap, I had to kill this guy to get the better tools. Well, damn, I guess I better go play the game. But no, that it's been fun. So
yeah, that's awesome.
that's what I've been up to. But let's move on, shall we? This
Yeah.
one is I threw under general because this is something I just found myself thinking about because it's come up a few times in my job. Places or people who are running events where even going into next year, they're still looking at either doing like a hybrid model where there's going to be an in person and a virtual event, or in some cases, they're going like you either are doing a hybrid or you're going back to the traditional convention or you're just like, screw it, we're going fully online. And like I was also seeing like all the news, like E3 was like doing fully online. Microsoft announced their thing that they're doing with Bethesda. Like it's just we're starting to see a lot of these events that would normally happen every year and they're still happening virtually. And I was just like, I was wanting to pick your brain a bit because I know you've been involved in some like events that have been done live in the gaming space, and just like what do you think the future is going to be? Do you think we're going to go back to a bunch of in-person events where the primary focus is going to be the live in-person event, or do you think we're going to be going more into virtual, or is it going to be is hybrid the way of the future?
Well, I don't think hybrid and only online is the way of the future. I think that it's sort of what's happening now. I know in terms of my work, like with the FGC and with fighting games, a lot of locals are starting back up. Not so much in LA, but in other parts of the world or in other parts of the country. There's definitely a lot more locals popping back up, and a lot of my coworkers are going back to their locals, which is honestly brought a tear to my eye of like so Fridays we've been doing kind of like panda game nights with our staff and with our crew, and we've had less and less people. And then yesterday or the other day, no one. Last week, this past week, no one was at game night, and I was kind of by myself. And I posted, I was like, "Hey, where's everyone?" And everyone says, "Oh, I'm at my local, or I'm at my, I'm at my local event, or whatever it is, and I'm at a
Because
tournament
it can
today."
do it now.
And I was like, "Damn, I'm like very emotional about it because it's like we're finally
We're finally going back.
like back, like it's kind of emotional. Um, but
Yeah,
so stuff like that's happening, and like the first super major is probably going to be CEO, which is going to be in Florida in December. So I'm planning on that, and like I think we're moving towards something. I think it depends. I think for me and you, it's a little different because we're in California, which is probably the state that's being the safest.
yeah,
Um, and so I think we have a different feel about it and a different like when you really look around, like everyone's starting to really kind of ramp back up into some sense of normalcy. So um, like I fly to, I have a family thing, so I'm flying to Vegas next weekend. And then and Vegas is fully reopening in June.
yeah.
Uh,
I think
and
Disneyland
then
is too.
yeah, and then in July I have reservations to go to Disneyland, and like yeah, I think we're getting kind of back to somewhat normal. I think like I won't be comfortable, or there's some people that won't be comfortable doing that without a mask, but like
Yeah,
just the fact that we can do stuff is a huge deal.
yeah.
Um,
I wonder how much of it too is your thing, like, oh, it's gonna go all live again. Is the fact that a lot of the stuff I am like very, very, very like not directly involved with, um, tends to be more of like I would say it's like a passive event in the sense that usually you are attending something to either watch someone speak or uh, attend a screening. Things
yeah,
that technically are, I think they are from as an member of an audience better in person, but don't require in-person attendance. So like I was
right.
thinking like for something like Comic-Con who has historically been really bad about sharing anything from their panels, where I would sit here and wonder, it's just like, is it worth it to do kind of what like BlizzCon did, which by the way got canceled,
Yeah,
where they've done this for a while, even pre-pandemic, where you could get the online ticket to where if you weren't able to attend in person, you could still like get a ticket to attend at home online. And I'm wondering for some of those larger conventions if it doesn't make sense to start doing something like that where you don't necessarily need to put every panel up there, but you could get away with like doing like a maybe like a $25 or $50 Hall H pass or Hall H and Ballroom 20 pass for like Comic-Con. Like the two biggest halls that get the most, like the largest panels, the most attention. I could see myself as someone who, sometimes misses going to Comic-Con, but also like isn't necessarily something that is at the top of my to-do list of things to do in the near future. I could see myself putting like money towards that, just so that way I could either watch it live or watch a rebroadcast later. And I'm wondering if we're gonna like where I think the hybrid model might become more normal. It isn't to replace live; it is to augment the audience. Because for Comic-Con, that might just be an additional revenue stream.
Yeah,
Like, there's no way
for sure. I totally
Comic-Con.
agree.
Yeah, if you're Comic-Con, people are going to go. You're not going to see you might see an attendance drop going into 2022 just because
Which
everyone is
isn't
still
that bad.
adjusting. But yeah, it's still going to sell out.
Yeah, well, Comic-Con needed an attendance drop for a long time anyway.
Yeah,
So
it was
let's be
too
real.
full. It was
Yeah.
getting too full. Like my first Comic-Con was the first time it actually sold all of its passes in advance of the event. Because apparently every year prior, you could actually show up weekend of and buy your pass. And you couldn't do that anymore from that point on. And so I was always used to it being full, but it definitely started to feel like more crammed the more I went. And I went at peak Comic-Con. But it's yeah, I can see like I can see these major events or like places like E3 where there was already some form of online component. I can see them embracing it more
Yeah,
to
so E3
augment.
this year is doing these
Yeah.
digital events,
Yeah.
which again, totally normal. And I'm E3 is such a weird spot because it's so expensive to have
Mm-hmm.
these booths and like this extravagant event. And there's like a certain magic to it, but at the same time, like I don't know if it's necessarily necessary.
And I think that's
Most,
going to be the thing for these conventions is look at Paradox Interactive had their own convention and they held it virtually. And
mhm,
really, what I think a lot of people, like a lot of these companies have probably realized is yes, there is an expense in terms of having to run a production, but you would have to pay money to run a convention to where for them, it's probably a similar budget. You can reach a wider audience and you don't have to worry about, you can pre-produce a lot of the content. So it isn't necessarily like, hey, we're going to be all jam packed in this 4-day period where our entire office is kind of shut down. Like you can work around that a bit more. And so I'm wondering for like things like E3, I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be a harder sell to convince. Like I think like Microsoft and stuff, like there's going to be people there, but I bet like smaller companies, it might not be worth it anymore. It might be
yeah,
worth doing more of an online push.
yeah, totally agree.
But also, I know we like because it's come up a few times with where I have again haven't been party to, but have heard rumblings about some film festivals where it's just like so much content anymore is designed to be consumed digitally. You might as well have like a part of your film festival be like live streamed to YouTube or Twitch or something.
Hmm.
Like that could help you grow your audience as a film festival, which is usually like a very localized event. So
Right.
Yeah, I think all that really has happened is a bunch of people are going to be more open to doing online components for like their events, but I wouldn't say it's going to replace it entirely. But yeah, I just was wondering what your thoughts were because you do that more than I do. So,
Yeah, again, like I think we're starting to get back to normal. We're starting to get some kind of sense of normalcy at the very least. I think it's a good thing. I think it's just a matter of trying to have that balance of like being safe and all that stuff. I think that again, us being in California really makes it so that we have a different viewpoint than like the
yeah.
rest of the country.
No, we
Um,
were talking about this briefly before the broadcast because you are flying out next weekend. I'm also flying next weekend to go see family, and going to a part of the country that is very anti-mask, anti-vax, and yeah, that's a little nerve-wracking. So it's like we're getting back to normal, but where you are in the world is like
right,
what level of normal you're getting back to is different. Um, so yeah, let's move on, shall we?
sure.
Games. I have a feeling this was on our agenda for the last canceled broadcast, but I knew you would want to talk about it. Mass Effect Legendary Edition has launched. I have received text messages from a few people with the planet Logan, and I'm just like, now I feel like I'm obligated to play the game. Intentionally putting off for reasons we've disclosed in the past about how you and I are planning to do something with Mass Effect. But how are you enjoying your Mass Effect Legendary Edition experience?
So I'm on second run. I'm halfway through the second run of Mass Effect 2. First run through the trilogy took me about mm, maybe 18 hours, which isn't bad. Mass Effect 1 took about 5 hours. Mass Effect 2 took about eight, and then Mass Effect 3 took about around another eight. So maybe like 20. Yeah, 20 hours.
And I'm totally taking notes for reasons. So we're saying 5, 8, and 8. Okay.
Yeah, that's me blowing through.
That's you blowing through, but it gives me numbers
Right.
for reasons.
That I mean that's me blowing through and like skipping dialogue through, like skipping through dialogue 'cause I already know what choices I want to pick and like what to go.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of time. Like the dialogue's a lot of time.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that number and triple it.
Yeah, and like skipping cutscenes and like all that kind of stuff. Like I just try to blow through it as quickly as possible because it was stuff where I wanted to see what changes were made rather than
Yeah.
like story stuff.
Or your second, I'm
So
guessing your first time through was like, I want to see everything, and your second time through is like, I'm gonna soak.
yeah, so like the first run through was mainly like, okay, what did they change? What differences do they make? Like how does it look? How does it feel? And then the second run through is like, all right, cool, let's like actually play this game now, in the way that I would normally play. Uh, so yeah,
Right.
that's kind of where we're at. But it's great. It's the changes they made to one are like again, there's nothing that I'm gonna say that like we haven't already seen in like
Yeah.
a document beforehand or like words from the
Or the
devs
trailer
beforehand.
where we've talked about
Right.
how well done this looks.
Yeah. So I mean, there's some rough patches still because you're slapping textures and shaders on pre-existing animations and models
Yeah,
because
you can't.
it's not a full remake, right? It's just a remaster.
It's a
So they're just
remaster.
slapping
Yeah.
there's the you slap a new coat of paint on, right? So like some of the animations are rough and like some of the more human characters, the skin looks a little strange because the lighting's been brought up. And then some of the animations are a little rough just because again it's old. So like,
Yeah.
they're it looks weird because it's 4K textures, but the I think the 4K textures actually hurts it because it brings out like how bad the animations are.
Because the texture
You
is
know what I'm
just too
saying?
good and the animation is just like is what
Like
God, the
real
first
jank.
Mass Effect is like 15 years old. Like
Yeah, it's like really old. And so it's a little tough in that respect. And there's certain things I feel brought this up too that so the first game is really atmospheric and really it's dark. Like the first game is like really dark. And I don't mean like story wise, like lighting wise, it's really dark. And so it's kind of the Blade Runner effect where it's dark on purpose uh, for like mood and for some of the effects and some like the really cool moments and the shots. You want it to be dark to like kind of
Oh,
hide.
so you think this is like there? This is of course the thing that pops in my head. There's when they did the HD transfer of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's this one scene that was supposed shot in day for night, and when they did the remaster, they did not correct it from to day to night. They just took the original source footage and didn't make that change, and so it completely ruined a scene. Is it kind of like that with the lightning?
Yeah, like so like boy, whatever. You're not gonna know by the time I get to this, but so uh the main bad guy in Mass Effect 1, his name is Saren. And so there's a scene on Saren's ship in the towards like the middle part of the game where he has he has like a claw hand, like a alien hand, right? It's like you know, whatever. And so he has his hand over his face, and it's really dark, so you can't really see the background. Like it's him in his seat, like in his captain's chair or whatever on the ship. And he has his hand on his face. And you know the two claw points are uh, open around his eye, so it's very very dark, and then all you see is like the glimmer of his eye between his hands. You know what I mean? Like you're picturing the shot in your head,
Yeah,
and then
it's really
so
dark. And if you lighten that
it's
up, you're going to see a lot of details that
so
you shouldn't have seen.
so when you light it up, you don't see the eye at all. His hand's covering, and then you see the back of the ship, which was never meant to be seen, so it's just blank wall. So it's like really kind of it takes away the atmosphere of that shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's moments like that throughout the game that are just kind of like, oh, well, this was the original one of this was cooler. But there's also stuff that's a way cooler that they changed that's way cooler and way better. So I don't like it's not like it's a full negative. There's a lot like it's kind of give and take. Uh, but
Kind of like
overall
how
comp
going back when they did like the 2K and 4K transfers of Lord of the Rings for like Blu-ray, and then for later for 4K, where Peter Jackson went through and did some relighting of some sequences where, and a lot
yeah,
of people were
exactly.
upset that it changed, but like it also meant that the look was more uniform. It's like, you know what? Yeah, it's like the negatives and the positives kind of balance each other out to where it isn't worth
Yeah,
like
because
screaming.
so Mass Effect 1, obviously you tried to play it I think once. And you've seen it before. Mass Effect 1 is like the most different of the Mass Effect trilogy. So the lighting changes and the control changes, everything brings it more in line with the trilogy. So they all kind of look the same.
Yeah,
So
that's what
that was the
I
reason why it was done.
that's what my
Um,
understanding too from everything I had read and heard. It had been that the Mass Effect 1 was the one that got probably was going to get like the most, I don't want to say cosmetic changes, but like that kind of fits
it's the
where it
most
just
different.
it's going to be the most
It's the
it's going to
most
one that's going to get the most changes because it was the one that was the most different.
yeah. Like and I don't just mean different in terms of like look, but like different in terms of gameplay and feel and like systems. And that game is so much different than the rest of the series. And so when I always did runs before, it was always like there's a lot you're constantly fighting the game in a weird way. Like
Well,
the controls were bad, the menus were even worse.
that's what I remember what you and I
Um
talked about was I got Mass Effect for Xbox, played
yeah.
it for like an hour and just gave up because of the controls. Like it just was
Yeah.
like
Um so the thing that I do want to bring up too is like the load times. So and the elevator stuff. which to me was one of the main reason why I was able to blow through that game. Where, um, so just for context, the load times in the first Mass Effect are absolutely atrocious. Even if you're playing on PC, like the game's it just takes forever to load. Um, don't have that problem now. I don't know if it's next gen systems or if I'm playing on Xbox Series X, but I don't know if that's an issue with the console. Like I don't know if that's an issue with the console or the way that the game's running. I think it's the way that the game is structured. Um, but anyway, the first hour of Mass Effect 1, I don't think the best way to put this. So playing for an hour, I got to where playing for an hour Mass Effect 1 in traditional Mass Effect 1 versus playing an hour in Legendary Edition Mass Effect 1, I got to probably where you would be at hour 3 or 4
Wow, and that's
in
just from
Mass
load times.
just from load times and
Wow.
I load times and like fighting the controls and like fighting the combat systems and like you're just able to blow through combat so much quicker. So Mass Effect 1, I played on I I played it on hard on Mass Effect 1 to kind of blow through it. Uh, it's probably that one's probably the easiest combat wise, so I put it on hard. But I didn't die at all, and it purely just comes from A, I know the game, but B, the combat's so much better, and the game is easy to begin with. So like, yeah, I just didn't die. Um, so that's something else to keep in mind. But you know, overall, the game plays great, looks great. They added a lot of like quality of life things that are like little things that no one's gonna notice, but things that like are very much appreciated. Like, not gonna spoil it, but there's one point in the mission where you're going up an elevator and the elevator stops and a big boss like a mini boss comes at you to try to kill you. And when the game in original Mass Effect 1, when the game loads in, you are in the open in this elevator, and you have to immediately sprint to a side. And as you're sprinting to the side, you're dying. And there's a pretty large chance that like as you're trying to find cover, you're just gonna die. Um, so they've added in a box or two or a crate or two in front of you, so that when that sequence starts, you can immediately hide behind that box.
Which makes it like
Stuff stuff like
small
that,
things
right?
like that.
That makes it easier for you to like not have to frustratingly beat this thing. So like
Yeah, because I know
there's little things like that.
there's been times where I've stopped games because I just feel like I'm stuck in the loop of I can't beat this right now, and I just like I give up. And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of times when games have gone back and done like the remaster thing, like they all, it's like everyone involved from the original developer to the company doing the remaster knows the part
The beats, right?
the beats that everyone hated, and they're just like, well, yeah, let's remove that.
Yeah. So it's stuff like that where there's just like, oh, there's a crate here now. Or like, oh, I remember this being harder. Why? And then you think about it, you're like, oh, this used to be they used to do this like fucked up thing that used to like mess you up. It's like, oh, they don't do that anymore. Like, oh, okay, that's great.
Great.
So
No,
all those kind of like little changes are things that were highly appreciated. And I think that like people aren't really talking too much about, but all
yeah,
that stuff's great. But overall, having a lot of fun with it. Again, it looks gorgeous. All the DLC's there. There's certain things that are like um, frustrating, but at the same time, like I understand why they needed to happen, but I wish they would have taken a little more time to fix. So like Mass Effect 2, for example, um, there's a reveal that you meet a character like an old character in Mass Effect 2. Like you meet a Mass Effect 1 character in Mass Effect 2. Um, and at like a time that you're not supposed like at a time
It's you don't
that you don't
anticipate it.
expect. You
Yeah.
don't expect, right? Um, but so that character is also involved in a important DLC down the line that you get later on. The game gives you access to them both at the same time. So on your if you're paying attention on your journal or on your screen, it's so as your one mission is like, oh, meet a familiar face or whatever, and then the second one is give this character's name this piece of information. And you're like,
Oh,
well, that ruins the surprise.
yeah. I'm sure it's one of those things that's probably going to get patched uh,
Well,
down
I
the
mean, like
road.
technically, if you play the games with DLC, like if you have all the DLC as you started the game, then it's always been an issue. It's just a thing of like,
You think they would have gone? You would have thought they would have fixed that.
right, but like I mean, since it's kind of baked in this time, like, hey, let's not give you access to this now, right? Like, let's hold
Yeah.
this for a little bit. Um, but yeah, you know, again, there's no correct way to play. I think there's a story way to play because obviously that DLC came out after the game was already out and like launched and stuff like that. So it makes sense that that becomes like that a lot of like older players take that DLC as like post game content. Um, it doesn't really fit within the main story, but I guess you can complete it early if you wanted to. There's no like nothing to stop you.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, like if you're a newer player, it does ruin the surprise and it does ruin like some there's stuff like that that ruins some moments later down the line
Where
if like
someone like
if
me
you
who had
don't
never
know.
played it before, who doesn't know, might
Yeah.
stumble
Like
into it.
it just doesn't make sense to do the DLC content before doing certain story beats. Like you're like missing big chunks of information. But you can technically do it and like it'll just make sense down the line. But obviously for like story perspective, it would just be easier for you just not to do that content until later on. So I think they give you the access to the DLC a little too early.
Yeah.
Like there's a DLC that leads directly into Mass Effect 3. Like it was the last DLC for Mass Effect 2, and it
And that's
leads
definitely
directly
something
into
you should not have access to at the beginning of Mass Effect 2.
yeah.
Right?
So they give it to you. They give you access. Like you get the message for it. Like hey, can you explore this and like can you look into this? Which is like the mission that triggers the ending or the beginning of Mass Effect 3. Um, they they give you access to that mission 3 missions into Mass Effect 2.
Huh.
So it's stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's
So
like
it's stuff
little
like that
things.
where you think they would, where yeah, it would made a ton of sense if they had gone through and, you know, put it in at a time where it made more sense for the narrative rather than just putting it in. Because
Yeah,
to
like
your point,
I thought
someone
I
who
had
bought
messed it up.
that, yeah, someone who would have bought the DLC way back when would have likely have beat the game already. To where,
Yeah.
yeah, of course you want to give them the content right away, but yeah, no, it does not make sense for if I was to be playing, I should not have access to that content right away.
Yeah. Like I thought I had messed it up or I thought something was wrong because I got that mission and I was like I should not have this yet. Hold on. And I had to go online and like people were complaining about it. I was like, "Oh, this is just a thing."
Yeah, well, hopefully, maybe, who knows? Because this is the other thing with like the remaster versus remake. They might not actually be able to do like I don't know, honestly. I would like I think it's a fair question of would they actually be able to make that change easily or would it require just so much work that they were just like it's not worth the effort.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And I that would be my question for like the developer would be
Yeah, I think that's a fair
was this something you
question.
guys just didn't think about, in which case fine, fair. You guys admittedly were remaking or remastering three very popular games, so you wanted to make sure you got everything as close to right as you can. And so you will miss stuff like that. Fine. No judgment there. But then the question is that an easy fix, or is that a fix where it's like, yeah, we could do it, but it would take like 3 programmers like 2 months to pull off, which who knows? That might be an accurate guess because I literally have no idea. Like, but if that was their response, I would totally understand why they would be like, no, we're not doing that. Like, it's, you know, that's just a fact of what they're digging in is they're dealing with completed games, and if they change one thing, it might break five others.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a problem too. But
So,
overall, I think like yeah, I think it's an awesome game. Again, it's just I'm being very nitpicky at this point. So
well, you also love this series.
yeah,
It's it's similar to how I think if you look at how there's some people in the Star Wars fan community who do this in the absolute most horrible way imaginable, but there's a reason why a lot of people nitpick every change in the special editions. It's because they really care about the story. But honestly, McClunky is a wonderful joke, and I'm really glad we have it. But no, I get why you'd be
McClunky.
nitpicky. You a have put in the time into the original releases of the games that you would notice a lot of these details, and b you really do care about the story to and the gameplay to where you would notice and care about how that was implemented. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think for
I
me it's more
wouldn't
it
say that
I
you're being
really
overly nitpicky.
I think for me it's a thing where like for players like you that are would be getting into it like feeling lost and like not having a great experience with it because it's you're just like why is this happening or like why it's very confusing. Like to me that's really concerning.
Yeah.
But you know
No, I am legit really excited for us to do our whole Mass Effect thing.
yeah, I'm super pumped.
Like it's one of those things. Like I even told you this. Like I am legitimately not letting myself buy the game because I do want to play it, but I also because we talked even prior to when Legendary Edition was just rumor. You had talked about wanting to do this. And I'm just like, I think for you, being able to watch me like experience the story for the first time is just going to be just from that alone. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to treasure and protect that.
I'm excited.
Yeah, should be fun. But cool. Really glad you're enjoying it. And everyone I've talked to who's been playing it has really enjoyed it. And I'm just sitting there going, yeah, things. So let's move on to our one bit of tech news because the Apple Epic trial has ended its opening arguments, or not opening arguments. It's really ended. It's now all up to the
Yeah.
judge. And my
I think Apple's
God,
losing this one.
I think Apple's winning this one. I
Oh, really? See,
think
this is how divisive this is.
I think what it really comes down to is Epic did a fantastic job airing out all of Apple's dirty laundry. I do not think in airing the dirty laundry, I don't think Epic actually built a case. I think they
So
just threw
I
a bunch
would
of stuff
disagree.
at the wall, and I don't think. I think. I think there's two issues. I think that unlike a moral, this is how it should be statement, as we've said in the past, Apple was kind of being a dick, and they need to make some changes to how the App Store functions. I don't think Epic made an argument where legally Apple can be or will be compelled to do anything Epic really wants. Like, I don't think they made their case.
So I would disagree with you. I would agree with you up until that last day. I think that last day and Tim Cook getting into it with the judge and the judge's sort of leanings in her questioning towards Tim Cook, I think shed a lot of light in the way that she's thinking about the case. I don't know how you feel about it. To me, that last day changed everything for my mindset of how the case
Um,
was going to run.
I've read some analysis, so people, to give you kind of a bit of an update, Tim Cook on the last day made a comment, or his commentary was that the App Store fees are to help them like essentially recover the cost of developing their IP. Like they're allowed to monetize their intellectual property was his, I think, statement.
Right.
And I've read some legal analysis from people who like they write or have argued cases about IP law. And they made a point of where everyone took that statement to be proof that Apple was being money grubbing. And they're like, the question here isn't that Apple's being money grubbing. It is under American monopoly law. His statement to that effect actually strengthens Apple's case because
Well, no,
under
I'm not even
American
talking about.
law, like you are allowed to monetize your IP. But
Yes, that's not the statement that I'm talking about, though.
okay, which one?
The statement, the statements that I'm talking about are the ones based around Apple's support of the games and everything going into the stuff with the free market with the free apps. And she names the Wells Fargo app.
Yes.
Um, and like all of that discussion, and sort of that Apple's support of the games past the download button, and how they aren't actually helping with content creation or with advertisement at all within their games. And so why should Apple charge within those games? And the example that they used was the car example of the Apple selling you the car and then charging you every time you refuel.
Yeah.
And so all of these discussions, the judge really seemed on Epic's side here throughout all of these questioning, this line of questioning.
Yeah,
She
because I
kept bringing
remember.
up counterpoint and counterpoint and counterpoint and counterpoint to Cook's. Cook was getting more and more aggressive because he kept getting shut down, and he kind of made
Which, by
this.
the way, Tim Cook is probably one of like the most flat in terms of emotion people.
Yeah, but you could tell he was starting to get a little heat.
Flustered and
That like,
irritated, yeah. Um, what I would point out to that, and this is the thing specifically to that I've seen countered, it is, yes, this is Apple's greatest weakness, is the fact that they have differentiated between the two, where I think it comes down to is I think the judge doesn't like it, doesn't think it's fair, but she might not be able to, under the way the law is written in prior court rulings, might not be able to do anything about it, or might write something knowing that this is like something that she thinks should be taken into account, but under current law needs to be done by legislation, not by court mandate. Like it is Apple's weak spot. It is definitely Apple's weak spot, and it's the one spot where this could blow up in their face. But I don't think if Epic wins it in this court case, this is going to go into appeal no matter what, and I think the judge knows it.
yeah,
To where I don't think she's going to say, "Oh, Apple can't do it," because on the flip side, Apple has argued that their reason for doing things like that, for content that is consumed on the device rather than content that is, not. In other words, like why you can buy a physical book from Amazon and Amazon doesn't have to pay Apple, but they do with the Kindle. It is where some people have argued that that is within Apple's right as the marketplace to do that. Whether or not it's fair is, again, a different question. But that Apple is within, under prior case law, within their right to do it. Also, in Apple's defense, is people like me would rather Apple be the one handling that transaction, because if there's any one industry that has proven it is not really good about dealing with, essentially loot boxes and aiming at young children, it is the games industry.
right.
So Apple can, and I think probably would, make the argument that it is in the consumer's best interest that Apple be the merchant, not the publisher. Because if you actually go into like some stuff like ProPublica did like an analysis a couple years ago where they followed up to see like how difficult is it for a parent to get a refund if their kid like racked up thousands of dollars of credit card debt in like Farmville. I mean, not specifically Farmville, but like in just virtual gaming. And Apple was really the only merchant that defaulted on the side of the parent and would actually put in effort to block and prevent that activity from happening. Whereas like Facebook would not do anything for you. Google wasn't better, but not much. I think if it really came down to that one specific thing, I think Apple could make a very good argument that there is a compelling reason for the consumer that Apple is that merchant.
See, so like this is so interesting. This is why this court case is so interesting because I
Yeah.
couldn't disagree with you more. So like it's such an interesting thing because I having been a big mobile games player, the Apple's been like the biggest pain in the butt to deal with in terms of refunds. Um, and like they just don't, it's been such a pain in the butt to deal with them. And so like, yeah, I think you bring up a lot of good points. I think my point, and I think the Epic's point too, it's just a thing of giving people different opportunities to buy different, like to use different services. Like there shouldn't be a reason why I can't use PayPal if I want to in a
Yeah.
game where if I'm just like if I'm playing like Fortnite's the prime example here, right? Like if I'm playing on iOS, I'm just not going to buy on iOS. Like I'm just going to go on my computer and buy uh for V-Bucks on my computer where I have various payment options that I can choose from. Where that's kind of a pain in the ass. So why can't I just do that on my iPad? Well, it's because Apple's controlling everything, but it's not. Once it's in the game, why should Apple have any kind of control?
Well, that
You know
was,
what I'm
I think Apple actually had a counter with your specific point to the fact that you could buy V-Bucks on the App Store and use them elsewhere. You could buy them elsewhere and then use them while on your iOS device. That they're in terms of lockdown, yes, you had to use it within the iOS, but Apple wasn't doing anything to force users on Fortnite to only be able to use V-Bucks they purchased on iOS devices to be used on iOS devices.
saying? No, but that's
No,
kind of
but
the
but the other point that I think they made as well was that in the console space, you often will not. You might be able to set up payment through the console system, but you're going to be buying it through whatever the store is on the console. And I think that's again another thing where it's like, yes, it sucks from the consumer perspective that there aren't these other easier alternatives where we would like to be able to have these other payment platforms. But if you look at just the rest of the market, that would put Apple at a huge, like, why would Apple be compelled to do that when Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft wouldn't be? And I think that also goes into Epic's, like, the real big problem in Epic's case is they're trying to argue that the App Store is a monopoly on the iPhone because you can only buy apps through the Apple App Store. And they were arguing that made it a monopoly. But under their own argument, it was so like loose that you could argue that Steam had a monopoly on games you purchased through Steam and that Epic had a monopoly on games you purchased through Epic, even though you were allowed to buy them and install them on the, like, they were not, they were running like the loosest definition of monopoly ever to try to claim that they had this anti-competitive case where they don't. And I think that's really what it comes down to is it's not that Epic didn't have points that are right or that I disagreed with. I don't think they really had a strong case overall, to where they might have these moments of strength of where, hey, it's not fair that you can do all these financial transactions on the Wells Fargo app and you don't have to integrate any Apple payment thing. Or you can't integrate it's the same thing with Amazon. To where, yes, it's not fair, but under like prior Supreme Court rulings, Apple's within its right to do it. And that's where I think Epic's case kind of falls apart, is that case law isn't on their side. And as much as, yeah, I think it's in the best interest of the entire ecosystem of Apple, especially since Apple's now making games themselves, they need to figure out some alternative, because they are running into like legit anti-competitive territory, like Spotify. Yeah, there is an argument there to be made that they are being anti-competitive and they need to rethink how they do financial transactions in spaces they compete, and that includes gaming. I don't think Epic walked out with a win. I think Epic might walk out with a small win, few wins here and there, but I think all in all, just having followed the case and read all the like analysis people did, it's just like Epic might come through with a couple wins, especially where the judge is like obviously doesn't agree with how Apple does it, but that doesn't necessarily mean Apple doesn't have like the law as written on their side. So I think that's really what it comes down to. Is the judge going to upend the law?
It's super interesting. Like it's super interesting just because I don't know the answer. Like to me, this is a case where like I could see this going either way.
Yeah, like I think Apple's going to win, but I doubt that. I also at the same time don't think Apple winning is going to be like the best result for everyone.
No, I think this is a lose-lose for everyone. I think either way here, this is not a good. Both sides are just kind of like it's odd. This whole case is really weird. And
well, like all the stuff that came out from it, like
all of the insights.
Like Sony gets kickbacks on V-Bucks.
Yeah.
Like
so
what?
This is well for crossplay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that like, and multiple people brought this up, and like it's something that I couldn't agree more with. Is like I don't think the U.S. court system was prepared for the level of secrecy that the gaming industry has. Because I think the gaming industry, more than any other one, since it's so young and so new, gaming deals are like pretty secret. Like no one knows exactly how these work, and so getting an insight into that has been huge.
Yeah, because I know that was actually Apple like hammered that part specifically to point out how it's like, well, we don't ask for a kickback to enable crossplay. Like they were basically just like, it just kind of like, look, like everyone is doing all this other wheeling and dealing. I don't think Microsoft, because they had like a Microsoft exec was on the stand at one point, and it basically it felt like an argument over semantics rather than like actual facts. Because spoiler, your business model determining how much your margin should be actually doesn't matter as much as Epic has been trying to say it matters. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they are due a 30% cut to make up on the back end because they might lose money on the console sales in advance. By the way, Nintendo is like the counter argument to that entirely. It's just like one of those scenes where where I think Epic might come away with some wins, but it literally felt like they were just throwing everything they could think of at the dartboard. And it just meant that they didn't have a like cohesive argument so much as they just were spraying and praying. Who knows? That might work. It might work. They legit. It's like your thing, because I remember reading that. It's like there were a lot of times where you could tell that the judge thought Apple was being unreasonable, and it's just like that could come back and bite Apple. But it's just like, she might not be able to legally, like she might be able to write in her like closing, like her decision, how much she thinks it's bullshit. That doesn't necessarily mean she can in her decision say it's bullshit, so Apple has to do XYZ. Like that.
Yeah.
That's going to be the thing, and that's going to be the thing that an appeals court or the Supreme Court would be really concerned about, is that aspect of her decision. And so even if Epic walks away with a loss here, it might end up helping them in the long run if she writes about how she thinks it's bullshit. But like, yeah, this why this case has been so fascinating to watch, is it's just like learning so much about like how Epic and Microsoft and Sony have been dealing with stuff, how Apple deals with stuff. It's just like everything you wanted to know and more is now like available to read on The Verge. It's really what happened.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Super interesting court case. If
Yeah.
you haven't been paying attention, please go look because it's one of the most important tech court cases ever.
Yes. This is gonna.
Um, so
This is going to be a landmark court case. If you are interested in it, Chris and I in our discussions have really just glossed over. We've kind of dealt with some specifics,
yeah, and I think the
but
fact that
there's
me
a
and Logan are
lot.
on, I think the fact that me and Logan are on very different sides of this too shows how interesting this court case is.
Yeah, it's like, because that's the thing is like we've been arguing, and it's not that arguing quote, not really arguing, but like we're not disagreeing with anyone each other's statements. It's more like what's the outcome going to be,
Yeah,
and we won't know for a few months. But yeah, it felt like for a while every day there was like some new testimony from someone where you were just like, wait, what? So yeah, it was just fascinating to watch. Lots of popcorn. But yeah, it both Apple and Epic did some stupid things throughout that case too. So it just, if you are interested, seriously go read up about it, because there's a lot to dig into. But let's move on, because holy crap, we still have a lot to go through. So the big news that broke this week, it went from I feel like it went from rumor to fact within 24 hours. Amazon bought MGM. MGM has been like the dying, forgotten child of Hollywood for a while, but it has like a really good library. The library it still owns and didn't sell off in the 90s. But the thing a lot of people have been talking about is the fact that MGM has some rights to James Bond. And now everyone's wondering, what is Amazon going to do with James Bond? And the answer is nothing. They can't do anything with it because
yeah,
the Broccoli family, the Bond deal with MGM is like one of the last, I would say the only other studio that had, or group that had any level of control like this. Got bought out by
yeah,
Disney in 2013. It was Lucasfilm, where the producer had full ownership and the studio kind of just had like a financial deal. So Amazon doesn't actually own Bond so much as they own the theatrical rights to Bond, and they have like are required to like provide financing for Bond. And yeah, like we're not going to get a bunch of Bond TV shows. Like it won't happen unless they back the dump truck up to Barbara Broccoli's house and it's filled with money. It's not happening.
Does Amazon have a lot of money?
Yes, they have a lot of money,
Oh, interesting. I wonder
but
if they use it for something.
yeah, I don't think they're gonna do a Bond TV series. I don't think it makes sense for the Bond franchise.
no,
It's one of the few franchises that I think actually, like, there's not enough ancillary material to really warrant going into television. Just the way it exists, and the fact it is kind of a chameleon and it will change from like decade to decade based off like the audience interest. Like I don't see Bond going TV. I also
no,
don't see it not being theatrically released, because it is, at least right now under Daniel Craig, it is the most the Bond movies have made their been the most financially successful under Daniel Craig. When you take into account inflation, the last time they were this successful was Sean Connery. So yeah, I don't see like the Broccoli family wanting to step away from that for a TV deal. But it's what's interesting is this leans like there's a bunch of like these little franchises that have been like played with but not gone anywhere. Like RoboCop is MGM. Stargate is MGM. It's just like there's a bunch of other like things that you could see Amazon potentially playing with. I think Bond is just for them is like I don't know if it was the cake or the icing, but it was definitely a factor. But it could not have been the only thing. Like there's yeah, MGM got a lot of their very valuable properties they sold off in the 90s because they were broke, but they still have assets to play with. So my thing is, yeah, like there's lots of question marks about Bond, but I'm more like, what, like, is this like, is the long rumored return of Stargate gonna actually happen now? I think this makes it either more likely or less likely. I don't know which, but yeah, I think it's just more of a, yeah, MGM was just like dying. It's like been dying for decades. So it seems kind of odd that they would have bought it, but at the same time, it's just like it buys Amazon just more stuff to play with. Because no media company really, anytime like a purchase of MGM got floated, every like Hollywood or establishment company would balk at their asking price, which was as much as Amazon paid. Whereas for Amazon, that's just, that's just change Jeff Bezos had laying in his couch cushions. Like 8 billion, whatever. Like, that's really what it is. For like how much MGM wanted, it was going to be, it was down to who's going to buy it, Amazon or Apple. And I think the rumor of buying No Time to Die for $600 million had been a trial balloon to see which of those two companies was actually interested in the $8 billion asking price.
Yeah.
But yeah, should be interesting to see how that plays out. More tech companies in Hollywood, apparently. Let's move on, because I don't know if you have more to say about that I haven't already covered.
No, that's about it. I mean, like you kind of covered everything. I'm just curious to see what goes, like how this is used and how this is utilized. But you kind of covered all the bases here.
Lots of question marks. We'll get answers later. Money is really what it comes down to. People are gonna, yeah. The big question is gonna be money about James Bond and which properties are they gonna mine, and which ones are ready to be mined. But let's move on to the Eternals trailer or teaser. Marvel didn't get to a section this time. I don't know about you, but I found the teaser really kind of meh while watching it.
Oh, really? I loved it.
Well, I think the concept of the Eternals is fascinating. Like having done the Wikipedia read to like refresh my memory of like characters and what everything was happening. I'm like, oh, this seems really it seems really interesting. I know I'm going to see it because Marvel, but at the same time, like just as a standalone teaser, it just felt kind of.
It looks so good.
Visually,
it looks so good.
Oh, it looked very pretty, but it also kind of just like felt all flash, no thunder type thing. But I think that's also just, I'm going with that's just the teaser being a teaser, not an expectation on the film itself. But yeah, I watched it and legit was like, this is kind of meh compared to like the Shang-Chi or Is that right? Sanchi?
Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi. Like, I really like that teaser from a few weeks ago. But this
Yeah,
one
I
was
think
just like,
I think it's different, right? Like they're different films.
this one's supposed to be an epic, and that one is like a more traditional Marvel.
Yeah. I think they're just different. I think that like this is going to be the most different Marvel film yet, just given what it has to do. It has to set up a lot over a long period of time in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's quite difficult. I think like it's funny because a lot of people are asking like, how does this tie into the Marvel universe? It's like you have no idea how important this
It
movie is.
just got bigger, which is, I
Uh,
think, the thing I took from like my little bit of Wikipedia reading is like, oh, everything just got upped to a bigger level.
yeah, it's just really important. It's a really important movie. I think like we're probably gonna see Thanos in here, like young Thanos in here. Um, like we're gonna start to see Black Knight, who Kit Harington's gonna play that role fantastic. Um, but Black
Keen
Knight's
Rob.
yeah, Black Knight's gonna be an absolutely huge part of the Marvel universe if they follow comic stuff. It's exciting to see all this stuff happening. Um, but yeah, I would agree with you that like it's different. I think it's gonna surprise people in the same way Guardians did. Um, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. No, it's just like again, it's like because I saw a lot of other like talking to other people. It seemed like there's a lot of people who were in the same ballpark I was, where they're like, this seems kind of just meh. But also at the same time, going, it's Marvel. I will give it the benefit of the doubt. And that I think says a lot about what Kevin Feige and Marvel can do. Is that the audience, or at least the type of people who are regular theater goers or regular movie attendees of Marvel films, at least, are willing to just give things a shot because it has the Marvel name. That says a lot about what they've accomplished in the past
Yeah,
15 years.
for sure.
Because again, like, yeah, I'm having a mediocre response to a teaser, but at the same time going, yeah, I'm gonna go see it in theaters. That says a lot about how like Marvel has like speaks to their success. But in other Marvel related news, because this broke with Shang-Chi, so move it to the next slide, James. They announced with Shang-Chi that when they're going to I think that one is not getting a day and date release on Disney Plus, but it brings Disney in line with a lot of the other studios where they are all now following, instead of the old school 90-day release window where a movie would come out and then it would be exclusive for theaters for 90 days. They are going now to a faster 45-day window. So that's like, basically a month and a half. And I say this is about bloody time. Like,
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer.
because and tell me what you think, because based off my experience having worked at a movie theater, most big movies that are
Die after a
successful
month.
yeah, even if they're huge
Yeah,
and they're successful and they're still having people attend a month after its release, like 45 days
unless
out, it's all but done.
unless it's Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah, exactly. That was honestly the one I had thought of as like the exception, was Grand Budapest Hotel, because it was in theaters. We were still selling tickets, and you could go out and buy the Blu-ray for like $3 more than the
Blu-ray.
ticket. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it was just like, but people will still come to see it, and like I think films like that are still going to be fine. But that was also not a movie that was going to be like crossing $100 million. Though it may have. I honestly don't remember. But yeah, I think this is, as much as the theaters have fought tooth and nail against it because they're so afraid that having home releases just closer and closer to the release of the film is going to eat into their, their sales, it goes into the thing I've said where it's like you've already lost that audience. And all the 90-day window did was make it to where films that would have done really well in some like chains that were members of the National Association of Theater Owners, they wouldn't pick up a film that would have done really well just because it had like a 2-week window. The one I'm really thinking of is Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer would have done fantastic at ArcLight, but they never played it because ArcLight was a member of National Association of Theater Owners, or NATO, but not that NATO. And it's just like, that is a movie we should have had it played. The theaters needed to adapt, and all COVID did was force their hand. They're not in a negotiating, they're in a bad negotiating position right now. They need as much as they can get. They need everything to open up. And they can't really say no to the studios right now. The studios, their hand just got that much better. And this is a change that needed to happen. It's better for everyone, and I'd say it's even better for the theaters. So, yeah, with this change from Disney, every major studio, at least as far as I'm aware, every major studio has made a change to their release window from anything ranging from 30 to 45 days. I think 45 days is going to become the new norm, and that's exactly where it should be. And it should be shorter for smaller indies. But that's the next fight that people like me can have on the internet, and then nothing will happen. Yeah, so that's it there.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Star Wars. Because since we haven't had a chance to talk since like May 3rd or 2nd, we have the one bit of news that everyone was talking about on May 4th, where Disney showed off.
We saw the lightsaber.
We saw the lightsaber that Disney had shown off in a presentation. And it looks really cool. But at the same time, I remember you and I had a text message thing where we were just like, I wonder how flimsy it is.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, we basically understand how it works now. It works like the best way to describe it is like two tape measures
With a motor.
With a motor, two tape measures with a motor, with a cap on top and an LED that's LED tube that's going up the top with you would assume a film. So that's how it works, and you can see the motorization of it in the video.
Mm-hmm.
So I guaranteed you cannot hit that.
Yeah, that was our thing. Is just like, this would be great for cosplayers, but it isn't going to be like, you're not going to want to hit anyone or anything.
You're not going to duel with this thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's something to be aware of. But it's awesome. I'm curious. I would be amazed if they let people buy it, because I think that you would have so many complaints, just consumer wise.
Yeah, that was
with it.
Something I know you and I discuss, and I've talked to other people about, where it seems like until someone can get their hands on it who isn't Disney, it's like there's so many questions about like the durability of it, to where like you and I were talking, or at least I think it was you and I, because I've talked to other people about this, the question of how durable is this? Is this the kind of thing that might break easily? In which case, if you're Disney, that's no big deal. If the cast member can kind of just discreetly go somewhere and grab like swap out sabers. But it's a different thing if it is in the hands of a consumer. You don't want something that breaks down easily or might have mechanical issues. So it's like, yeah, what would be good and fine in Disney parks might not be fine in the hands of the consumer. So there's a whole lot of questions about this, because I know I would want to buy one, and I'd be willing to deal with it if it's like, yeah, okay, I can't hit anyone with it, whatever. It's not like I'm going around dueling people with my current lightsaber, but yeah, it really comes down to just like how durable this thing is.
Yeah.
So no, it looks cool, but you're right. You could tell it ignites slower than the lightsaber does in the movies. You could tell it's like a bit like you could see the effect in action. Like if you know how it works, you can tell, but it still looks cool.
It does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
it's
still just
still
like it still hits that note of this is like the final frontier of what we all dreamed of as kids, which is like the ability to light your own lightsaber and have it like not be a big piece of plastic. So, man, I want one. But yeah, like is it just because of the whole motor thing too? This isn't going to be like the Galaxy's Edge build your own lightsaber. There's no way in hell that this could work with that. Like it's going to have to be all like you're going to be able to buy like Anakin's lightsaber. You're not going to be able to build your own with this. Like it just I do not see that happening.
yeah.
But it's cool. It's definitely cool.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see kind of where they go with the tech moving
Yeah.
forward.
It's one of those scenes where I think again, I think this is something that I talked about in text messages is like, even if it's not ready for consumers now, you know, Disney is probably thinking along the lines of, well, we know consumers will want it. If we can refine it, like it's ready for prime time, but it's not ready for consumers. So it might be like in a few years, it's something you can buy. Or like Ultra Sabers is going to make something like there's going to be something. But let's move on. And James, why don't you just throw on the spoiler tag? Let's just go straight into it. Okay, it broke. Whatever. Bad Batch. So how far behind are you, Chris?
I'm 2 episodes behind.
Okay. In just general terms, then, what is your take on Bad Batch right now?
I like it. I think that there is. I think I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think there's a lot of. I love the character development. I just love these characters. So there's nothing. I don't know where they're going story wise, and I don't know where it fits in. But I love these characters. And I like seeing them do stuff. It's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I remember watching like the first episode, like the feature length pilot essentially. Um and I thought it was fine. It reminded me a lot of like the pacing that they had done with Siege of Mandalore because a lot of this was
Yeah,
like concurrent. I didn't finish it going, "Oh wow, this is amazing." I'm like, "Okay, this is okay. I'm on board." And then I feel like the next few episodes really cemented my, "Oh, actually this is good. I'm enjoying this." And I think as it has breathed and existed for longer, I feel like our concern going in was, is there enough to these characters to carry a series after watching them in their appearance in the Clone Wars? And I find that concern being less and less of a thing the more the series goes. Because it felt like, oh, these guys might be a little bit more like one note, but then you realize it's like, no, actually they had them fully fledged out. It's just that I think the big thing is like Wrecker is very much like the archetypal strong dumb, and if you focus too much on that, you would assume everything else in that group fell into like a similar archetype, and you realize, yeah, they're playing with those tropes, but it doesn't feel bland. There's enough there that they're playing with that you're interested in who they are and what they want to do.
yeah,
And I think having like a character like Omega and the fact that this is Definitely more serialized than Clone Wars was.
Yeah, like I just don't know where they're going. It just seems like these little vignettes and side stories of
Hmm.
like, cool, this is what they do on a daily basis. And it's like, okay, this is great. What does this do? Like, what are they
Yeah,
doing?
it feels kind of almost like how Mandalorian has this bit where you could tell that there's like this through line of a story, but it isn't. The through line isn't necessarily the story being told in each episode. Like it's being built up and delivered a little bit. Like there's more being like revealed as it goes, but it doesn't necessarily feel like heavily serialized like a Battlestar Galactica, where if you miss an episode, you don't understand what's going on. But it's like a lot of it too is like the time period they're in. There's so many questions, and I also feel like they're doing a good job kind of like answering some of those questions of like and like realizing like the clones very much like a switch did get flipped on them and just how they behave to other clones and civilians after 66. And it just kind of makes it a more fascinating world to watch because you know, or we know, having watched this, like the Clone Wars, how the Jedi encouraged and the clones are often very, very independent and individual characters, even though they all look the same. And that kind of got
Right.
wiped away. And it's kind of like disconcerting to watch.
Yeah.
But no, like I remember when they first announced Bad Batch, my comment had been like, "These aren't the characters I wanted a story with, but it's like a time period I'm interested in." And I don't think my statement of that was necessarily wrong. Like this isn't necessarily again the characters I would have picked, but they are showing us a side of Star Wars and a time period of Star Wars. And I don't know if we could get the same level of experience with a non Jedi character that wasn't a clone. Like, really, if you think of like, yeah, you could tell it from a civilian standpoint, but like having to be clones who are also like confused as to what's going on and like going like, man, there's something wrong. Like, really does help hammer home like how fast things are changing. And how
Right.
efficient the switch was because like Tarkin and Palpatine were just ready to go.
Right.
But yeah, no, I'm enjoying it. When you get caught up, we can start diving a bit more into like individual episodes. But
Yeah, again, like
yeah,
I'm just for me right now, I don't know where they're going. I don't
hmm
know what the plan is, and so it makes it very hard for me to like keep up week to week because it's just like I there's no incentive for me to keep watching like where I like, oh, I need to watch it this week.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Because I'm just like okay, well, they're just doing their thing. Um,
yeah.
but
It,
again,
I
like
I get the same thing where I haven't watched it. Like it comes out Fridays, and I haven't watched it. Been like, oh, it's Friday, I have to watch. With the past few, like I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll catch up on the weekend. But the at the same time, it's you're right. It's just like normally, even with Clone Wars, there was a sense of an end point, even if it was so far out that it wasn't really like a driving force. It still was there, and that was the fact that we knew how it ended, more or less. And so you were watching to see how that played out. Now it's just like a question of what, like, we legit don't know what's next. And that, you know, isn't a bad thing, but it definitely doesn't because there's the through line is them trying to survive, not like the Mandalorian where it's just like trying to save Baby Yoda or return
Yeah,
Grogu
there's like
to
not
the
a quest, right?
there's no yeah there's an obvious quest in Mandalorian, and here it's just survival, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, going
Yeah.
back to what I referenced
Again,
Battlestar
it's just
Galactica, that was the whole point of Galactica. So it's just kind of, but it's not necessarily like must see the
yeah,
immediate.
like Bad Batch is turning into a show that I just like have on in the background, which is not something that I'm like excited for week to week. Um, it's like again, it's not bad, and I enjoy these characters a lot. I need to see. It doesn't even need to be a quest or like some kind of grander
Hmm.
purpose. Like survival's fine, but it's like, what is the through line through this entire season? And I don't know what that is yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, if you think back to Rebels, like
Rebels
I
had
don't
that
know.
problem too in the beginning.
Yeah, I don't think Rebels really had a strong through line. In the beginning,
Yeah, it took them a
and
while to get going too.
it took them a while to get going. And in fact, at some points, I would say Rebels, for much of the series, I don't know if you could say there was a strong through line running throughout it. But because of everything that got established in the first, really the first 10 episodes, they laid enough seeds to keep the story going in future seasons, to where even though there wasn't but next week they're going to do this, there was definitely like you were invested and wanted to keep up with it. And if things hold out, Bad Batch might fall into the same thing where like around 10
It seems like
episodes
a
in,
Filoni thing.
yeah, it seems like this is again like this is the Filoni thing. It's like the first season is laying a lot of the foundation, and then it just will hit you upside the head with a lightsaber. Okay, maybe not a lightsaber because then you wouldn't have a head, but you all of a sudden like everything just kicks into full gear. My big thing would be like looking at Rebels. It's the moment Tarkin shows up. The
Yeah.
moment Tarkin shows up in Rebels, it's just like everything went from okay, we've been like cruising along and drive, and now it's like oh shit, we're now pedal to the metal. Like it just everything picked up and just became that much more serious, and that
I forget,
might happen.
Was the Tarkin thing before or after the Leia stealing the contraband or whatever for
Before,
Leia?
well before.
Okay.
Uh,
'Cause I remember that was really early too.
the Princess on the Fall one is second half of season 2, I think.
Was it that late? Wow, I thought it was season one for sure. Because I remember
No,
that being
it's
really early.
because I think a writer has been at this point Ryder Azadi, the governor or former governor, has been introduced, and I believe he was introduced at the end of season 2, when they are tracked to Goral, which I believe was the end of season 2, because season 3 they're trying to find the base. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
in which case, and it might even be season 3. Hold on. I now
Was it
need to
that
know.
late? There's no way.
Let me
Sorry,
pull
completely derailed this, but yeah,
No,
like
no, no, because
it's
this is super important. We must know. Our audience of James is just chomping at the bit for this information. Where is it? Oh, I don't want. Where are you? I know I have it somewhere on my iPad. I'm trying to pull it up. Why are TV shows not showing up now? Okay. Oh, Screw it. I'll look at Disney Plus. Why am I trying to pull it up when I could do it this other way? Because it might be, yeah, it might be season 3. Like it's definitely like in the middle of the series. It's not. Let's see. No, oh yeah, mid season 2. It's episode 12 of season 2.
Yeah, man, I thought it was so much earlier, but I guess I was wrong. The the thing with all these episodes were like the thing with all the Rebels episodes is like they're either unmemorable or they're so memorable that they all blend together. If that makes you know what I'm saying?
It's like I would say like the first 10 episodes of Rebels are the hardest to get through. Not because they're bad, but because like what we're dealing with Bad Batch now is like it doesn't really feel like there's like a long-term story. Like we all were like, oh, this is probably like with the early foundations of the Rebel Alliance, but that was just kind of like the expectation rather than like set and established and like this is what the story's about. But then again, yeah, I this is where I think we've talked about this where like Clone Wars has like better episodes. Like the best episodes of Clone Wars I think are better than the best episodes of Rebels. But I think Rebels overall is a stronger series. But yeah, I'm wondering. I think Bad Batch might be falling into that same space of where give it like their short 10 episode season, and then all of a sudden we might actually the hammer's gonna fall and everything's gonna be like oh shit. And that's if Filoni follows his normal Filoni plan. Which, by the way, a lot of people have missed this. He's actually not the director. He's just an EP.
Yeah, but they've been marketing it as Filoni.
Oh, yeah. You know he's involved.
Yeah. Like, but they specifically called it out as like Dave Filoni's next project.
Yeah. I think what it really comes down to is because of Mandalorian and Ahsoka and all the live action stuff going on, he probably just doesn't have the time to direct the animated stuff right now. Which,
yeah,
boo-hoo. Filoni's doing a lot of crazy Filoni stuff in Star Wars. I'm not gonna cry. Like, oh no, more Filoni? Yeah. But, no, like, I feel like Bad Batch is one of the series where I'm finding I'm enjoying it more as the series goes on. So.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying these characters. It's just a thing of, I need something that keeps me coming back and like wanting to watch week to week. And it's like, cool.
Yeah, because I know the moment Rebels really started to hit its stride, I definitely fell into that. I have to watch this week to week.
Yeah,
especially by
I just don't feel that right now.
But yeah, I don't feel that yet for Bad Batch. I also didn't really feel that at the beginning of Rebels. I was watching week to week because it's new Star Wars content, not because I was like, oh my god, I have to watch this. But yeah, that's Filoni's pattern. Like that he seems to like is this slow burn, establish everything, and then everything.
It pays off in the end.
Yeah, it definitely pays off in the end. So, but that does it for me in Bad Batch. Anything else?
No, that's about it. Again, like it's just a thing of I don't have too strong of thoughts, just because it's like again everything we've just talked about. So
yeah,
I enjoy it. It's just now it's determining how much I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So James, let's roll credits. So please like, share, subscribe, do all the fun things you're supposed to do on the internet, like, share, subscribe, leave comments. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or just simply want to say hi, you can shoot us an email at feedback@quality3.net. Stay safe, get vaccinated, If you are not fully vaccinated, please continue to wear a mask. If you are fully vaccinated, it might be worth wearing a mask too, even though the CDC says you don't have to. Who knows? Just stay safe is, I think, the important thing. Otherwise, take care, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.